Hi everyone, let's quickly get into how to communicate with the spiritual world. There is a spiritual universe that you're told exists if you're connected to any variety of community that's involved in the esoteric or spiritual. Now, what does that mean? How does that work? And how does this correlate to spiral dynamics? The way I understand spiral dynamics is you do not have to experience psychic awareness or phenomenon in order to be an advanced stage. I do say that what normally happens doesn't all happen all the time, maybe 90%, this is my approach, that you'll become aware of archetypes. You'll be exposed to some kind of possession. Some want to say that stage Teal sees archetypes. I noticed that I became somewhat aware of archetypes in stage Teal. From my understanding is I'm slowly moving into stage Aubergine. I don't call myself Aubergine until I'm like 50 to 60% and I'm already moving on to stage Clear. That's how I navigate these stages. So staying on topic, if you are in an alternate state of consciousness, you will tap into the divine. So what do we mean by divine? There's a whole scope of divinity, of what we mean by divine. It could be referring to other people's thoughts. It could be referring to something like hearing someone in the future. It could be, there's just so many, there's a whole list of things you can talk about. And everyone will have their own skills and abilities, no doubt. But what's my ability? What's my skill? My skill is I can overhear what people believe or feel deep down, or, and this gets very confusing because the ego is a very complex phenomenon where he or she or it doesn't want to admit what it feels or believes or wants. And so it covers itself over. And this is what Freud really meant by the complexity of the superego and the ego makes it really difficult to ascertain what it wants. I don't know if he discussed it in depth, but he did hint at it, and other psychologists spoke about this, that it's not really so feasible to know what a person wants because the ego is so complex. But push comes to shove, the ego will cause the person's true desires not to be visible. But what I have is I have a psychic awareness where I can kind of pick up intention. I can read their mind. I can read their energy. So even if a person has rage or hate inside of them, I'm picking up their soul, right? So this is what in ancient traditions they said. He doesn't really, his soul wants to do good, but he's caught up in materialism. He's caught up in being selfish, right? So that cliche, you start to understand it once you reach upper tiers like Coral and Teal, probably also Auber, because you start to sense people's motives, what they really want, how they really feel. And paranoia, schizophrenic people often were labeled schizophrenic when they were just tapping into the true intention of people. Someone has an ego that's really rigid and doesn't want to admit what he wants, and then he or she misunderstands a person because he or she's picking up the intentions, whether good or bad or hostile or loving, towards them. And that's where confusion steps in, and misdiagnoses have happened, I'm sure, in the past with regard to that particular phenomenon. So how do you get into an alternate state of consciousness? Because that will explain how to undergo these states. What I personally do is I just go to sleep. And about once a month, maybe once a week, I start hearing the thoughts of various people or entities or spirits or egos. And it's not always so consistent. And that explains why people are complex. Like, girls seem to like you one day and they don't like you another. The reason is because there's a fluctuation of energy. So they feel excited because a different spirit is animating. And then, and this also applies to men too. That's why they're also volatile or unpredictable in how they'll feel. So it is a stereotype to say women are unpredictable and men are predictable. We just frame it that way because it's convenient, but it isn't so accurate. So the unpredictability of people comes from a fluctuation of energy, of spirits, right? Yeah, when you drink alcohol, There's a reason why you get into different moods, because different spirits take over different agendas or different aspects of the spirit, right? If you want to consider the ego as like a different part of your own spirit, different framings of that. Now, the alternate state of consciousness doesn't have to be accessed when you're going to bed or going to sleep. It could be accessed through meditation. Some people are really good at this. From my understanding, is the more stages you go up, the more dissolved your ego becomes. So you tap into this, to the ever-expanding universe more easily, and people who are up there in those tiers are going to be sensing these things more often. So, quote unquote, they're going to be tapping into spiritual awareness more easily and more often. So as you advance, you can expect that without much skill. I do recall Ken Wilber saying that when you meditate, it automatically ups the stage you're in. I've been meditating just 20 minutes a day for the last month or two. It ups the stage, and it probably also moves transitionings quicker. So if you want to get mystical states, definitely do that so you'll move up the stages. But that's just for a timeline, from a timeline perspective, but from a paranormal perspective or on-demand psychic awareness perspective, you would have to train your brain to be as clear-headed as possible. So I personally believe I have a form of undiagnosed ADHD, which makes it very difficult not only to meditate, but to have a good quality meditation where I make big epiphanies, quote unquote, that all these high tiers are making. Now, once you reach a high tier, you're going to be existing with the epiphanies of a dissolved ego. So even though you do have ADHD, it'll be ADHD, an enlightened ADHD. So you'll have a clear head, but for me, it's like I have a clear head, but I can only have a clear head for like 48 seconds at a time, and then I think of something else, and I'll choose to go somewhere else. And I've concluded that stage coral will do this, right? They'll multitask, they'll be distracted a lot, like with some kind of ADHD. But the way I conclude now is, if they have some kind of ADHD or inability to focus, it'll be activated during the stage of coral, because the sense of urgency of that masculine stage. But to stay on topic once again, the way to access these things is to train yourself to clear your mind, to really be present, to make this eternal now the only thing that exists in your mind, in your state of awareness. So that's gonna be the secret to accessing them. Because what happens when you go to sleep? There's no mind, there's no thoughts. Or there are thoughts, but it happens by itself, and you're kind of watching them. And the thoughts that you hear, yes, they're your thoughts. So if you do hear your own thoughts, if you do hear those voices, like those paranormal stuff, the voices of other people are you. It's interconnected. So even if, like, people would say, oh, that's schizophrenia, the phenomenon of other people being connected to you, is a truth. And so it's not schizophrenia as much as it is just an interconnected system of consciousness. It's the truth. It's not like I'm trying to prove anything. It's just how it is. So if people have a methodical way of understanding it, I would tell doctors not to diagnose them with schizophrenia. I would say, is there some kind of way of understanding it that is scientific? And I think this goes under that category. So we got going to bed, being an altered state of consciousness, and encouraging yourself to be in an altered state of consciousness if possible. And the way to do that is to advance tiers, and the way to do that is to factor in a meditation practice. So this is on how to tap into this spiritual world we keep hearing about.